Hello, my dear students. I am Gopal Maliwal, and in this PPT, I'll teach you about the meaning of inflation, the definition of inflation, the types of inflation, as well as the causes for inflation. Right. So, first of all, let us understand the basic meaning. You must be knowing at least about what is inflation. So, what do you understand by the inflation? Inflation is generally it's a quantitative measures of the rate at which the average price level of the basket of selected goods and services in the economy increases over a period of time. That means we are talking about a constant increase, constant and sustainable increase in the price of various goods and services, which is in a bunch. That means what? Basket, right? So inflation is actually it's not a temporary phenomenon, it is a permanent phenomenon. That means it is the constant rise in the general price level of prices where a unit of currency buys less than it did in the prior period. That means what happens because of this? The purchasing power of the goods and services decreases. That's what inflation all about, right? So what happens because of inflation? For example, previously you were able to buy. So, for example, previously you know able to buy something for 100 rupees. After after a month, you may have to pay more than 100 rupees for that, or after a year. For example, if you talk about gold, gold prices in 2000, say for example 910 was about 15,000 for 10 grams. Now it is around 43,000 per gram. So what has happened in that? That the general, the price of the goods and services, that means the gold, has increased over the period of time. Okay, but that same thing can happen in other things also as well, like food, clothing, housing, recreation, transport, consumer staples, etc. And what does inflation do? It measures the average price change in the basket of commodities and services over time, right? And the definition given by various authors, like Peterson. He has said that the word inflation, in the broadest possible sense, refers to any increase in the general price level which is sustained and non-seasonal in character. That means, as I told you, it's not a temporary phenomenon; it's a permanent phenomenon. That means not seasonal. Second thing is which is sustained. That means it remains there. Okay. Next. As per Johnson, inflation is an increase in the quantity of money faster than real nominal national output is expanded. That means the volume, the output doesn't increase in a manner in which the supply or the quantity of money increases, which actually creates inflation. Next. So based on that definition, we can understand that there are generally three types of inflation. They are moderate inflation, galloping inflation, and hyperinflation. Now let us understand about each and every one in detail. It's a moderate inflation. This is a very common inflation, we can say, which happens everywhere. Okay, and which is also necessary for the growth of the economy. So what is moderate inflation? It's also called a creeping inflation. That means the rise in the price is very nominal. That means single digit annual increase in the price level. Okay, so what happens during this period? The price increases persistently, but at a very mild or moderate rate. And as I told you, moderate inflation is actually necessary for the growth of the economy. Okay, a moderate rate may vary from country to country. That means for some country, the moderate rate may be 5%. For some country, the moderate rate may be 2%. So it varies from country to country, right? But actually, what is the specialty of this inflation? That here, individuals hold money as a store of value. Why? Because this inflation can be anticipated in advance. That's why individuals hold money. Second one is galloping inflation. What happens in galloping inflation? The galloping inflation refers to the exceptionally high rate of inflation that leads to an increase in general price level. That means a double digit or triple digit inflation per annum is called a galloping inflation. Okay, galloping inflation is also known as jumping inflation. Why? Because the prices jumps at a very fast rate. So that's why in the words of Momul and Blinder, galloping inflation refers to an inflation that proceeds at an exceptionally high rate, as we have studied discussed at the double or triple digit rate. Galloping inflation has adverse effect on the middle and low income groups because it is actually for the middle or the lower class people to sustain in an inflationary condition. Right? So what happens in this kind of situation? It requires strict measures to control inflation. Right? Very important and a very high rate of inflation, which is known as hyperinflation, which can actually destroy the entire economy of the country. Right? So as the name suggests, the hyperinflation is the situation when the prices rise at alarmingly high rate. That means more than 3 digit per annum. That means more than 100% per annum. Sometimes it goes to 4 digit as well. The prices rises above 1000% per annum marks in the beginning of the hyperinflation. Hyperinflation takes place when there is an unrestricted increase in the supply of the money in the market. That means when the government prints too much money or when the government supplies too much money into the market and when the government doesn't have any proper control over the market. During this period, what happens is the paper currency becomes worthless. That means there is no, value of the currency of that country in terms of paper currency. So what happens is people start trading in kinds. That means the barter system takes place instead of paper system. Okay, and golds and silvers are traded for the exchange, right? So we have certain examples like the economic conditions of the Germany. Means in Germany, what happened in 1922-23, the inflation rate was almost 322% per month. That means you can have an estimate that it was almost near to 3500 to 4000% per annum, right? Same thing happened in the 1989 in Argentina when the inflation rose to 4,923.3% per annum in a single year. In Brazil, the same kind of situation was there in 1991 when the inflation rate was 854.60% per annum. So same things happened in the Zimbabwe. Currency was actually removed from the circular and the government had to print new money. Now, let us understand the causes of inflation. What are the causes or the reasons for inflation? There are certain causes like higher demand, increase in cost of production, increase in public expenditure, deficit financing, increase in velocity of money, population explosion, hoardings, excessive importance to exports, tax reduction, the imposition of indirect taxes, the price rise in the international market, and natural calamities. These are the certain causes which actually I could, point out, figure out, but you can have your own points of causes also. That means you can add some causes or you can remove also as per your intellectual. Okay, this is just the certain causes which I could find. So that can vary on a personal level. Everyone in brief. First one is high demand. So, what is the main, the reason for, inflation? One of the main reason is what high demand. That means it's also can be called the demand push inflation. That means what happens is in economy when the demand for a commodity exceeds its supply. That means the demand is on a higher side and the supply is low. So what happens in that case? Then the excess demand increases the price of various commodities and services. Right. Next, the increase in the cost of production. Yes. So as you must be knowing, what are the factors of production? Like land, labor, capital, etc. are the factors of production. What happens is due to one or another reason, the prices of these factors of production increases. For example, the trade union may increase the price of labor. the government may support the minimum wage system and they increase the minimum wage for the laborers. Because of that, the labor cost may increase. Sometimes because of the shortage of supply of the material cost may increase. The electricity cost may increase time to time. Depends on the electricity service provider companies. So because of the various reasons, many a times what happens is the cost of production or the factors of production cost increases, which in turns increase the price for final goods, and this is the cause of inflation. Third one is increase in public expenditure. Now, as you must be knowing, in economy, you must have studied the national income, in which we have one of the component of national income is G. It stands for government expenditure. So what happens when the government is actually increasing its expenditure? So what happens in recent times? What the government expenditure is an important element of total spending that you must be doing, and determines the aggregate demand. What happens is, yes, in the underdeveloped countries, the government spends a huge amount of its revenue on public welfare services for the welfare of the public, providing goods and services to the large population of the country at a very reasonable rate, maybe at cost or below cost, right? As you must be knowing right now, as the situation is going on, the world level recession is there, the corona effect is there. Because of that, what is happening? The government is giving very the goods and services to the large part of the population at a very decreased rate. So what happens because of this? That ultimately the government needs to cover up these things from somewhere. Okay, when the government is actually spending a lot of money, so thereby creating the demand of the commodities into the market, and which in turns increases the inflation. This is deficit financing. Now, as we have studied about the government expenditure, the deficit financing is something related to the government expenditure. Generally what happens is the expenditure of the government is greater than its total revenue. That happens, many a times. Because of that, there is a gap between the total income and the total expenditure. So that gap needs to be filled by borrowing money through various sources, and this in turn called deficit financing. So what happens because of deficit financing? Deficit financing increases the overall money supply into the economy, and this increase in money supply comes is an increase in velocity of money. And now you must be knowing the quantity theory of money, in which we have MV is equals to PT, whereas V stands for the velocity of money. That means how many times the money has, what you can say, is got circulated into the market. P stands for the general price level. T stands for the total quantity of the goods and services traded in an economy in a particular time period. And M stands for money supply. Generally, MV is equals to PT. That suggests the total supply is equals to total demand. Now, what happens is when there is ease of doing business, that means the funds are easily available in the market. There is ease of doing business. There is less paperwork, and everybody is thinking about starting their own business. The new startups are coming into the market, and more funds are coming into the market. Because of that, what happens is the velocity of the money increases at a faster rate, and this in turn pushes the general price level and creates inflationary situation. This is population explosion, right? This is a very general, common cause of inflation. What happens when there is a population explosion? Means when the overall population of the country increases, that increases the demand for the, total demand for the various goods and services in the market, right? Again, the demand of goods and services depends from the country to country. Means in the developed, the demand of the underdeveloped countries will be something different from the demand of the developed countries or developing countries. So, but yes, what happens is when overall population increases, it increases demand for the various goods and services, which in turns increases or creates inflation. Next is the hoarding. Yes, this is actually, you know an artificially what you can say we can say artificially created shortage of the various goods and services by certain group of individuals, a group of persons, or group of companies. So what they do, they are the people or entities who stockpile commodities and do not release them into the market, and thereby they create the artificial shortage of the goods and services into the market. And this artificial what you can see shortage creates the demand to increase, or the people are ready to buy the things at a higher price, and this leads to inflation. The next is excessive importance to exports. Sometimes what happens is, suppose I am a producer of any particular commodity, and if I see that the I'm getting good amount of good price for my product in the international market rather than in the domestic market. So to in in the greed of earning higher profit, or to get good amount of my product, I may export it instead of selling it into the what you can say domestic market. The things happens normally. For example, you can see that the finest quality of the tea from the Assam and the other parts of the country, which are actually the tea producers, they are exporting their finest quality of tea to to various countries in the world, and thereby earning a lot of good amount of money. So yeah, the reason can be like it is not affordable by the people, or the what you can say local people. But still, what happens is, when you are exporting more and more commodities outside the country, so it creates obviously the shortage of that commodity into the domestic market, and which in turns create inflation. Tax reduction, yes. Sometimes this happens that the ruling party, suppose the inflations are coming, in the near future. So sometimes the ruling party announces, the reduction in the taxes in their last budget before the what you can say the next elections. So because of that, what happens is, the people are able to save more because they have to pay less taxes, and when they are able to save more, they are able to consume more, they are able to spend more. So their purchasing power increases, their consumption rate increases, and because of that, the demand for the various goods and services increases, but the supply doesn't increase generally in the short run, and because of this, it creates inflation. Next is the imposition of indirect taxes. Yes. So as we have studied this, that sometimes the government decrease taxes, but otherwise, what happens is, generally you can see that the major part of government's revenue comes from the indirect taxes. That is the most important source of revenue for any government. So what happens is, when the government increases the rate of indirect taxes like GST or excise duty, you must be knowing that recently what the government has done, so that in spite of decrease in the oil prices in the international market, the prices of the diesel and petrol has not increased considerably in the what you can say in the local market. Why? Because the government has increased excise duty on those petroleum products. So what happens because of the increase in the indirect taxes? The indirect increase in indirect taxes ultimately increases the cost of production of any product or goods or services. And when the cost of production increases, just to maintain their profit margin, the suppliers or manufacturer increase the final price of the product so that they have the minimum impact on their profit. This in turn again leads to inflation. Reason for inflation can be price rise in the international market. Now you must be knowing that each and every country in the world, or the country like India, remains dependent on certain goods and commodities and services, uh, remains dependent on other countries for the various goods and commodities. For example, the crude oil. The India import crude oil from the OPEC countries at the other part of the world. What happens is, when the price of these imported goods increases in the international market, so the overall production cost in India increases too. and this leads to inflation in the domestic market. The next is natural calamities. So other than these economic factors, there are certain non-economic factors also, like the natural calamity. For example, if there is a flood, then the crops are destroyed, and because of this, there is a shortage of the supply of these agricultural products, and which leads to increase in the price of the commodity. So these also can be one of the reasons for inflation. So students, these are the causes or reasons for inflation which I have explained. I hope you must have liked this PPT. Okay, so kindly go through this PPT in the most attentive manner, and based on this, certain questions, certain assignment will be given to you in upcoming days. Thank you so much for listening and watching this PPT. Stay safe, stay home. God bless you.